Right, so my name is Erin Becky. I am the marketing manager for Decentralized Energy Canada, and this is a quick introduction to Impact Careers, which is the overarching program of the webinar we're presenting on today, and it encourages everybody to take action and choose a career in sustainability. So a little bit about DEC. We are a national industry association that is dedicated to the development of decentralized energy. We have roughly 100 members that all span from startups all the way to large corporations and everybody in between. And our bread and butter is connecting our members to project opportunities and business development opportunities, both nationally and globally. If you'd like to learn more about us or become a member, please visit deassociation.ca. And a little bit about Impact Careers. So the goal of this program is to help identify the jobs of the future and how those jobs are going to be incorporating the UN's SDGs into the job market. And our main goal is to connect job seekers to sustainable employers. We've chosen 7 of the SDGs to focus on within Impact. And today's webinar is going to be focused on SDG7, which is affordable and clean energy. And I wanted to give a quick shout out to our program partners. Impact Careers would not be possible without you guys. Schneider Electric, EHRC, Women in Power, and Alberta Innovate. And that's my quick presentation. Again, my name is Erin Greffley. I'm the marketing manager for DEC, and my information is on the slide if you'd like to connect with me. And without further ado, I will pass it off to Jatice from Schneider Electric to start off the webinar.
Hello, everyone. This is Shitesh. Thanks for a nice introduction. A quick introduction about myself. I am a part of the leadership team for Schneider Canada Operations and manages the sales function. I've been in the industry 15 years plus, and I've worked in 4 different continents in North America for the past 5 years. Schneider Electric, we are the global leaders, I would say global, the most global and the local leaders in energy management and automation. And today's subject is really close to my heart, right? We are talking about affordable and clean energy. And we are in the phase of our lives where we are facing the biggest energy dilemma. I read today, it's not a Canadian stat, it's a US stat. When we talk about inflation, the inflation in the US is 5.3%. But what was most striking to me that the inflation is the highest in the energy sector, where they're seeing a cost increase of up to 30%. So that's what I was meaning when I mentioned energy dilemma. We all know that by 2050, the demand will increase by twice. The cost will increase multifold, and we all have to reduce the carbon emissions and drive more sustainability, right? So how do we do it? That's the crux of what we discuss with our customers, that how do we develop a more sustainable world for the longevity. So today I'm going to talk about the holistic approach to active energy management. So guys, when we talk about sustainability, we talk about energy. Both are interlinked, tightly linked, whatever we want to call it as. So if we look at a typical operations, we are looking at 3 different dimensions in any typical operations. We're looking at the supply side, where the energy is coming from, whether it is coming from the grid, whether it is coming from the renewable sources, where is the operations running efficiently, how much power loss are we having, how we can optimize the resources. And then at the end, whatever we are doing, are we doing sustainably? What is our carbon emission? How can we ensure that the technologies we use can help us reduce carbon emission? And if I look from an outside, I believe there has been a lot that has been done on these 3 domains separately. At Schneider, what we are trying to do is that how do we create the link between these 3 domains and give the actionable output to drive even more efficiency and sustainability. How do we buy smarter? Do we go renewable? Do we go the grid? Do we install microgrid? I see Sarah will be talking about smart grids later on, so perfect segue. What do we talk about efficiency? How do we optimize the existing resources that we have, and what do we do in future to optimize it further? And the same thing for sustainability. All this interlock is done with the help of data management. Data management is the key to understanding what we are doing. Data management is a key to tell us factually where we are and where we will go. So we talk about data management in all these three tangents and sitting in between. So on the supply side, what do we do in terms of the budget planning? What do we do in terms of strategic sourcing, as I was mentioning, whether we go renewable, whether we go with the grid or we install microgrids? What do we do in terms of rate analysis optimization? Has the consumer looked at that part? From a sustainability perspective, we look at what is the corporate commitment that they are willing to do, and how are we tracking it? How do we capture the non-invoice data? What are the goal settings we do? And on the efficiency side, as I said, we look at the process optimization, performance optimization. We are looking at not just preventive measurements. We are looking at predictive analysis. How can we predict an event and act much earlier to avoid any catastrophic events? And all of this is sitting in the middle when we talk about how do we help validate the data that is into all these systems? How do we use the data streams that is being put together, and what actionable output comes? So data management is the key. As you can see, I've talked about multiple data streams in these three different domains, and this is more a customized approach that we do with the customers in terms of what is that they are willing to commit to, and what is that they are willing to deliver on. How do we do it? One source of sustainability data, we have the intelligence internally, where we have created 2,500 plus data streams. What it does it for the stakeholders, for the customers, it gives one source of truth, consistent reporting. It helps us understand what is the return on investment for the different applications that has been done. From a data platform perspective, as I said, it is fully customizable depending upon what we want to measure. For example, a CFO might be interested to know what the energy usage is, and from what sources that energy is coming. How can they offset their carbon emission? As we all know, carbon taxes are going up, and do we use the offset to become carbon neutral, or do we become carbon neutral by deploying all these sources, right? So a lot can be customized when we talk about the different tools and different technology available, and we have the experience in doing that. Just to share the length and breadth Schneider does, I think most of the people associate Schneider as a product supplier, right? We have been, and we are very proud of that. We have done a hell lot of a job in producing the best PLCs, the best switch gears, but this is a business which we have started around a decade back, and we have created a dedicated business unit within Schneider focused on consulting to our end users. So this is a live example. It happened in the US, University of North Alabama, and they have a 70-year-old plus building, and one of the biggest challenges they were facing was how do they figure out their capex investments for the future when they already have such an aging infrastructure, right? So we had a sit down with the end user. We figured out that we can help them a lot if we sign an energy performance contract, which we were ready to do. The end result was that we were able to reduce the energy cost by 20% by end of 2020. The project saving overall in the next 20 years will be around $27 million. and the VP of the business and finance was very kind to give the testimony. And what it has done, it has helped the end user redirect that capex into some of the deferred maintenance projects that they wanted to do. So just one of the example, and not just in university, we are doing it in the different sectors. We are doing it with Equinix, with HP, Iron Mountain, digital reality. A lot has been done. We have gained a lot of experience, and we try to remain neutral to the hardware that is there in the ecosystem, because sometimes it can be a little sensitive for the end user, right? They might feel that Schneider, hey, you are the supplier of the products, and here you are doing this consulting as well. And hence the reason why we have created a separate business unit to stay neutral to the hardwares that is installed at the site. So on that note, I'll hand it over to the next speaker, and looking forward to the Q&A session at the end.
Thanks, Shatish. Up next, we have Sarah Mensch from NP Power, who will be presenting next. Sarah, I'll hand it over to you to present your screen.
Okay, let me know when you can see some slides.
We've got them now.
Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for inviting myself on behalf of NP Power to speak to you today about what we're doing in the smart grid space and trying to really get New Brunswick ready for the future of electricity as we see it. A little quick background on NP Power, just to put things into context. We are a Crown corporation of the government of New Brunswick, and our shareholders are essentially the citizens of New Brunswick to whom we supply power. We operate essentially as a not-for-profit utility, with the exception of the fact that any revenue we do achieve goes to paying down our debt. So we don't really have shareholders or anything like that, other than keeping low and stable rates for New Brunswickers is the return on investment that we give through NP Power. We operate at approximately 83% non-emitting today, and our goal is to get to 100% non-emitting, well ahead of the federal targets. And we're on track right now, probably somewhere around 2040, 2041, all of our fossil fuel fired plants will reach end of life. So we're basically looking out over the next 20 years. How do we go from the 83% non-emitting that we have today and get to that 100% non-emitting into the future? So the challenge that we have right now is that NP Power is a winter peaking utility. So New Brunswick, we heat a lot with electricity. There wasn't really a supply of natural gas available to New Brunswickers before the 2000s, and there was some oil usage in New Brunswick, but electricity was really cheap because that was NP Power's mandate. So we made it really easy for homeowners and business owners to have access to electricity that was clean and affordable. The challenge that we have, though, is with so much winter heating that's happening in the province, that puts significant demand on our grid. So we are a winter peaking utility, and basically what our load profile looks like, this dark orange line here. We have a significant morning peak. Everyone with their great energy efficiency behaviors, we all turn our thermostats down before we go to bed at night, and then we get up in the morning and we crank those suckers back up. So there's a significant demand on the electrical grid. And what that basically means is that we try to have clean power as much as possible as our base load. And then we have peaker plants that are only used for about 2 hours a day, maybe 10 days a year. But that's the bulk of where our emissions are coming from, is those fossil fuel fired plants. So our challenge is, how can we get our customers in New Brunswick to reduce that morning energy consumption so that we don't have to rely so much on those peaker plants? So the solution to that problem is really based in a combination of energy efficiency as well as the transition to distributed energy resources. So we're basically looking at, in the very near term, trying to get about a 5% reduction in peak energy consumption just through energy efficiency and some basic demand response programs. As we get closer to 2040 and as more of those thermal plants are reaching end of life, what we're hoping to do is build a virtual power plant that seamlessly integrates customer-owned generation into the asset mix so that we can follow the loads and meet the needs of our customers. So if we can achieve that, this will reduce our reliance on peaker plants, which are, again, those fossil fuel fired plants. And that way we don't need to build new generating stations into the future. So, 20 years, basically looking at a lot of those fossil fuel fired plants hitting end of life. And the two things that we do see wanting to continue beyond that 2040 date would be a combination of hydro as well as nuclear, which is non-emitting, combined with customer self-generation is what we see the future of electricity for New Brunswick looking like. So the challenge, of course, is that we have the utility of today and the networks of today, and we know where we need to be. So we need to start getting ready today for that future of energy that we see for New Brunswick. So we're starting by doing some research, and this is a super fun project that I get to work on right now. I'm an electrical engineer, and I'm the energy technology subject matter expert for this project. I'm working on both the North Branch project as well as Shediac. These are projects that we're doing in partnership with Nova Scotia Power. So they have a smart energy community that they're leading as well. They're looking at solar panels, they're looking at battery storage, they're looking at integrated electric vehicle charging into the smart grid. And we have 3 communities in New Brunswick they're doing as part of Smart Grid Atlantic as well. So this is giving us the opportunity to have connected resources to the NB Power grid. And 2 things that we want to do. One is observe. So regardless of whether or not things are connected to the NB Power smart grid, what happens when customers introduce things like solar panels and batteries into their homes? What happens when we introduce thermal storage? So there's a company in New Brunswick that makes thermal storage heat pumps, which has significant benefits for us, both on that energy efficiency side, so adding heat pumps to homes that traditionally heated with electric baseboard reduces peak just through efficiency, but can we also store energy in those homes using the high efficiency heat pumps? So that's a big aspect of the Shediac project, where we're looking at solar panels in home or in garage batteries and thermal storage heat pumps, but we're also monitoring loads in the homes by monitoring water heater energy loads as well as heating energy consumption. So in a combination with the smart meters that we have, so we can see the total energy usage in the home, we want to have a better understanding of what loads in particular are contributing to that morning peak. Because it's probably not going to be things like dishwashers and washing machines. It's really showers first thing in the morning. And again, 80% of that peak is coming from people turning on their thermostats for their space heating. So really wanting to understand which loads are contributing the most to peak and which technologies can help us to manage peak, both from the utility perspective as well as for the customers. North Branch is a really exciting project for us. It is a net zero community that is currently under construction. So those are all going to be brand new homes that are being custom designed around solar panels on the roofs, batteries being installed in the garages. We have microgrids and nanogrids that we're building to support all of that technology. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. There's also a First Nations community. So this is a community that's an existing community that we're looking to retrofit the homes from an energy efficiency perspective, adding the microgrid layer and a solar farm to help try to make that community as self-sustainable as possible. And again, in the Shediac project, that one is existing homes that we're adding technologies to. So each one of these projects is a little bit different from the other, old homes versus new homes, different types of technologies, sometimes the same technology, but being used 2 different ways, because we recognize that there is no one right answer going into the future of energy. So just a little bit more detail on these projects. So Shediac is 500 homes, so it's a fairly significantly sized study. We're doing that one in partnership with the National Research Council. And we've already onboarded all of our participants, and we're currently in the process of narrowing down who's going to get which technology installed in their homes. We also have 2 commercial buildings that have been retrofitted to basically be net zero. We're building a 1.5 megawatt solar farm that is going to be virtually net metered to those 2 buildings. And as the local MP loves to brag, through this project, the Federal Pension Center in the town of Shediac is now the federal government's first net zero building in Canada that was retrofitted to a net zero standard. So that's actually quite exciting for us. So a lot of different facets there, retrofitting homes to add new technologies, retrofitting buildings to add commercial buildings to add new technologies, and building a solar farm that we can virtually net meter for homes and buildings that maybe don't have the capacity to get to net zero with rooftop solar. Again, North Branch, 75 under construction right now homes. We expect those to start going live sometime in 2022. Completion of the 75 homes should be in 2023. And we're looking to do some interesting things here. So we've got a microgrid that we've built. We have nanogrid controllers that are going to be hooked to the solar and battery inside these homes, and really giving us that ability to understand, what percentage of the home's energy usage is being met by the solar in real time. How can we use batteries to maximize on-site solar self-consumption? And we're also going to try something we've never done before, which is giving members of this community the opportunity to sell energy directly to their neighbors. So what we want to try to do is maximize renewable power in this community as much as possible so that they can avoid having to import energy from the grid into this community. And again, that First Nations community that we're looking to retrofit homes to make them as efficient as possible, and then add the layers of microgrid controllers and community solar farm to help get them to this self-sufficient state. So there's an energy system platform that's being built behind the scenes to support all of the projects, with 2 of them having a microgrid component. And this just gives a little bit of a different view on those platforms. So it's really exciting for us, given the fact that it has so many different technologies. It's also the fact that we do have so many different players, a major partner in this being Siemens, with the federal government heavily involved in this, both as a funding and a research partner, because there are things that they see potentially being of national interest. So what can we learn today in Atlantic Canada through Smart Grid Atlantic that might inform some of our smart grid policies and technology decisions going forward, so that we can achieve the federal government's goals of net zero emissions by 2050. So that's why it's so important for us to look at both direct control through microgrid, as well as load aggregation platforms through energy management systems, and looking at a variety of different technologies. So we have everything from inexpensive smart thermostats to really expensive solar panels and batteries. And the other facet in this is introducing different types of rate schemes that we can test against some of those technologies to determine, what are some of the different price points that we would have to introduce in the market, both from maybe a peak versus off-peak perspective, charge or discharge the battery perspective, storing solar energy versus sending energy back to the grid. And what are the rates that we could introduce that might entice a homeowner to want to purchase that kind of technology, or participate in programs if they already have the technology of their own accord, that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions through energy sharing programs and all sorts of different things. So these are really important projects for us here in New Brunswick, and of course would not be realized without the very generous contributions of the federal government, as well as our partners, Nova Scotia Power and Siemens and the National Research Council. I think that is it for me, and I will leave you with a little note that if you do want to go and look more at our smart grid project that we have underway, so we are fully converting all homes and businesses in New Brunswick to smart meters, as well as we have an overall grid modernization happening behind the scenes that supports all of the Smart Grid Atlantic research. And we're looking forward to this basically, continuing for years to come and hitting that net zero non-emitting well ahead of that federal government target.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And I've seen a couple questions come through the chat. We will get to those at the end of the webinar. Up next, we have Jeff Roberts.
Let me load it up there, Aaron. I can see it now. So good afternoon, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks to Decentralized Energy Canada for hosting this event. I have the pleasure of chairing the board of directors of Bow Valley's Green Energy Cooperative, which is a community-owned, volunteer-led social enterprise with a vision to bring accessible and affordable renewable energy to Alberta's Bow Valley. Now, it's interesting, I was just listening to Sarah there, and we're probably at the other end of the spectrum. Alberta is a deregulated province where pricing of energy is set via supply and demand. And rather than being a large provincial scale, having a large provincial scale utilities, we have a number of small independent or some small independent power providers, but also some small micro power providers, which Bow Valley Green Energy Co-op happens to be. We're based in Canmore, Alberta, but together with Banff, Cochrane, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nation, we represent a community of about 60,000 individuals. And as you can imagine, residing in the foothills and the front ranges of the Canadian Rockies, we are an ecologically conscious population. Next slide. There we go. In keeping with the theme of today's event, I'd like to share a little bit about our journey in making renewable energy both accessible and affordable in the Bow Valley. And I'll touch on that in 4 areas. Our journey in establishing the Renewable Energy Cooperative, our roots, if you will, the business model that we're currently following. I'll talk a little bit about our first project, which came online in September, and the future opportunities and direction for our cooperative. Next slide. So the cooperative's genesis occurred in 2019 when Canmore's Biosphere Institute received a grant from Energy Efficiency Alberta to undertake a community generation feasibility study and engage with the community on such a community generation endeavor. Jody Conwell, who is sustainability coordinator at the Biosphere Institute, had a vision to have solar panels on all the roofs in Canmore, which wasn't actually possible. But from this vision, Bow Valley Green Energy Co-op was germinated. Through community engagement, a core group of like-minded individuals with diverse experience and with some time on our hands, began the task of organizing ourselves to launch a community-led renewable energy entity. The premises behind the co-op were such that not everyone has access to capital to facilitate renewable energy installations. Not everyone can physically install renewable energy infrastructure on their homes and businesses due to the fact they may be condos, apartments, or other shading due to the mountains that we're in. Not everyone had a means to manage an installation. And given the opportunity to participate in the energy transition, individuals would come forward to become members of the co-op and bring their investment capital with them. This group evolved into a steering team and evaluated corporate models, renewable energy models, the applicable legislation in Alberta, and we developed a business plan. In December 2019, we filed our articles of incorporation, which were granted in May of 2020 due to the COVID delay. Following that, our 7 initial founding members received their membership certificates. Bylaws were filed in November 2020, while we concurrently evaluating investment opportunities. And our first AGM was held in February 2021 to adopt the bylaws and open our membership to the general public. Our membership currently sits at about 50 members with an aspiration to be at 100 prior to our second AGM, which we've tentatively scheduled for March of 2022. Membership in the co-op avails members to the right to set direction of the co-op through the election of the directors, the vote at the AGM, and access to investment opportunities through the purchase of investment shares. None of this would have been possible without the support and mentorship from existing renewable energy co-ops across the country, notably the Ottawa Renewable Energy Co-op in Ottawa, with support from their president at the time, Dick Bacher, and the SES Solar Co-op in Saskatoon, whose secretary, Jeff Montgomery, was invaluable in providing advice to us along the way. Bow Valley Green Energy Co-op still has a collaborative working relationship with Biosphere Institute, where the 2 of us collaborate on community education initiatives. Our first PPA was, as a result of all this work, was signed in May of 2021, and we exported our first, or produced our first electricity on September 17th. A little bit more about that later. Next slide. So current business model predicated on solar microgeneration, taking advantage of Alberta's microgeneration regulation, which is designed for smaller, less than 5 megawatt behind the meter net metering installations serving a single host. Legislation allows renewable energy production behind the meter up to an equivalent of an annual year's normal consumption. In other words, a year's worth of energy can be offset by renewable energy generation. This arrangement reduces import energy costs, which has been pointed out earlier by Chetez is a prime factor in inflation in our current environment, and it reduces the transmission and distribution costs by reducing the load on the distribution and transmission system. It can also provide the ability to receive carbon credits, and it also provides a source of local capital, which offers a modest return to the investor, and it keeps dollars in the community. The work is done locally, the returns are local, the investment is local. And the little diagram shows how net meter billing works there. Next slide. So the business model involves, we work through 4 steps. One is identifying a prospective host, assessing the technical feasibility, the economic feasibility, and then establishing a contract. Attributes of a good host or customer needs to be willing to embrace the energy transition. They need to be an individual that essentially has a lack of access to capital. The premise is if you have access to capital, you're probably already doing this. The physical attributes of the property have to be such that you can take advantage of the sun or the or geothermal, and the long multi-decade ownership horizon, given that we amortize the cost of the installations over generally 20 to 25 years. Technical feasibility, property needs to support the installation, the structure needs to be capable, the energy infrastructure needs to be suitable, shading is a consideration. Economic feasibility is related to the capital cost of the installation, the ongoing maintenance and operating costs, and the host's existing energy contracts. What does it take to break those if they have longstanding ones? And finally, the contract with the host, where we share the value of the upside between the what the host is going to save with this and what it costs the co-op to produce. Co-op remuneration is based on that that value that the host derives from generally from the energy import as well as from the reduced transmission and distribution. Next slide, please. This is just a slide which depicts the various entities involved, with the co-op in the middle, members to the left, funding agencies feeding in as well. The solar, the renewable energy installation, relationship to the host, and relationship to the grid. Next slide, please. So Bow Valley's first energy project was Ralph Connor Memorial United Church in Canmore. It was a proof of concept project. Next slide. So get this moving, we made a proposal to the church council, which was accepted in November 2020. Next went with sought vendor proposals, which we received in January 2021. Power purchase agreement with the church was put in place by April 21. We secured investor commitments by May 2021, and within a week had signed an installation contract. Due to supply chain issues, installation didn't occur until late August, early September, and we energized the panels on September 17th. There's a view of the panels on the church of the completed installation, and a view of that was September 19th's production profile. It was a bit of a cloudy, sunny, cloudy day moving through the mountains on that day. where we produced 46 kilowatt hours of electricity. Next slide. So our process that we use for working with our hosts, we have a collaboration agreement in place that allows us to access invoices, engages with potential vendors on behalf of the host. We establish a steering team, we draft a contract, we prepare a feasibility report and a proposal for the host. That leads to a power purchase agreement, which outlines the term of the agreement, the pricing for the agreement, generally a fixed pricing is what we're trying to go with, and obligations of both parties. We have the next step is funding of the project through member investments. Sign an installation contract, which is generally a tri-party contract between the vendor, Bow Valley, and in this case, Ralph Connor Memorial Church. There's a separate contract with Fortis for interconnection to the grid. And then we energize and monitor and reap the benefits over the next 21-year period of this agreement. Next slide. So a little bit of fast facts about this project. It was an 11.25 kilowatt array. Generally, we produce about 1,000 kilowatt hours per kilowatt of installed capacity in Canmore. So we're expecting about 11,000 kilowatt hours per year. We have an expected delivery cost of about 21 cents a kilowatt hour over the 21-year period of the contract, and that includes capital repayment, debt servicing, maintenance, operations, insurance. Ralph Connor's average annual pre-COVID electricity cost was about 29 cents a kilowatt hour. 7 cents of that was energy, the remainder was transmission and distribution. Our September expected production was 385 kilowatt hours, and our actual was 447. So we're beating our metrics so far. Next slide. So where do we go from here? The key to achieving financing is demonstrating our ability to deliver projects. So this is the first one. We've got a number of others on the way, which will help us there. We have a membership base in the co-op of 50. We're hoping to grow that to 100. Financing right now is an issue. We access financing once we have the PPAs in place. We need to have. We're looking to develop a revolving credit facility that allows us to sign an installation contract while we're drawing from member investments. We've got a project pipeline of about 4 solid projects in the queue. Next is working with collaboration opportunities with other renewable energy co-ops within the province of Alberta. We're also considering becoming an energy marketer within the Utility Net program and Solar Club, which is a Alberta-based program. We'd like within 3 years' time to transition from volunteer base to having at least 1 paid staff, and looking to move into other areas of non-solar renewables, wind, biomass, and geoexchange, which is we can do here in the Bow Valley, and again continue our community energy education and advocate for that. So that's it. The next slide gives us, if you're more interested in, this one doesn't have our website on it. That was an update later. I did after, but. Thanks, and I'll take any questions if you got them, or we can wait till the end. However you want to work that, Erin.
Yeah, we're gonna wait till the end to take questions. And thank you so much, Jack, for your presentation. That was very insightful. Next up, we have Trevor White, and I'm gonna let Crystal share his presentation because I was having some issues with mine.
All right, thank you. So today I'm going to be speaking about community project financing, really through the lens of the community itself, that perspective, and then also from a third-party financier or a bank. I'm I'll present kind of three different structures. They're not really innovative per se, but offering some considerations and suggestions on what to look for within those three individual structures. So I'll start with a bit of a background on Switch on the next slide. So a little bit of us, we're a sustainable developer and IPP based here in Alberta with a focus sort of across North America. Really, our focus is on underserved markets. So we're not a big utility IPP. We don't chase utility style projects. A lot of what we do is through physical power purchase agreements. We call them meaningful megawatts. So our projects, the general idea is they're customer facing and they have an inherent value proposition to that customer, whether that's lowering the delivered cost of electricity, helping them achieve their sustainability targets, increasing the reliability of their operations. Our portfolio spans multiple technologies, multiple regions or customer segments, and we've raised and deployed about 16 million of capital over the last couple of years. A little bit on our portfolio, we have 4 assets operating in Ontario. They're energy storage, behind the meter energy storage. The play there is savings and emissions reductions for customers. We have 7 megawatts of distributed solar and another 15 megawatts of energy storage entering construction. About $110 million of development projects under MOU with customers with offtakes, and a growing pipeline across different markets, which I'll touch on here on the next slide. So our focus is generally, as I mentioned, physical supply through distributed generation. What we call the C&I or commercial industrial market, that's largely Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario. Like I mentioned, distributed behind the fence solar to help customers achieve a lower delivered cost of electricity over a long term or achieve their emissions reduction targets. Behind the fence or behind the meter energy storage. A big focus for us, microgrids and remote communities and mines, which I'll talk about today. So that's largely diesel abatement throughout the north. In aggregate, there's 360 communities that still burn diesel as their main source of electricity. And then what we would call kind of a small distributed solar or utility segment. The key theme here is customers that either don't have a means to capital or do not have the in-house capacity or skill set, and by virtue or default to their current source of electricity, whether that is diesel or whether that is the grid delivered electricity. So looking for optionality, and that's what we mean by underserved markets, is we can step in. Typically, they're not easily financeable, or large independent power producers are not focused on them because they're small or there's no scale. And that's really where we see an opportunity. So what problem are we solving when we talk about access to electricity and cheap access to electricity? It's really energy poverty. And that's a different scale depending on what market you're in. Prices vary across the country, whether it's the electron itself or the delivery of that electron. But when we look at energy poverty and when we focus on communities, they don't necessarily have the buying power, the capital, or the means to solve energy solutions. And so when you think about remote communities in the north, they're paying 3 times the Canadian average of electricity. You know, the Canadian average is 12 cents. They're paying on average 36 cents an electron or a kilowatt hour. And some of the communities we're working with, that gets up to $500 to even $900 a megawatt hour. So, you know, a lot of the communities that don't have the means or don't have the ability to afford cheap power are the ones paying the most across the country. And that's really the problem we're trying to solve. I'll move on to the next slide. So some of the challenges, right, around communities, financing communities, whether they're self-financing or whether they're looking for third-party financing, why does that exist, right? How do we solve this problem? I hate to say it, but generally it's money solves that problem, right? Access to capital to deploy projects. and that's the challenge. So some of the complexities from a community perspective, capital, they don't always have available capital. It's either through tax-based revenue streams or through local economy. They don't have the buying power or the access to credit facilities like large corporations do, for example. Competitive process, a lot of communities have a requirement to go through a procurement or partnership process. Certainly when we're working in the north, many of these communities are Indigenous based, and so those partnerships don't happen overnight. They're long lead. They're in development for a long time. You have council turnover in different pieces. So there's a bit of a partnership and procurement process that becomes cumbersome or difficult. The decision-making cycle, like I said, can be slow. And then the goals. Sometimes there isn't a clear definition of what it is that the community is trying to achieve. Is it a lower delivered cost? Is it emissions reductions? Is it increased reliability? I don't know if you've ever heard a diesel generator. It's extremely loud, right? In some cases, there's noise pollution. Some of the challenges from a financing perspective, credit. So communities obviously don't always have, they're non-investment grade. They don't have a huge credit. It's not like you have Facebook as your counterparty or Google. So how do you manage that credit exposure or that credit risk? Size is a challenge. Most community loads are small. And typically efficient capital, or any capital for that matter, requires scale. So when you're working with lenders or working with banks, a lot of them, it's hard for them to do anything that's small. Certainly when you're looking for third-party financing, money always wants a conviction to future deployment. So how do you wrap your head around financing small projects, which is difficult or often more expensive? 10-year preferred contract lengths for financiers don't always align with community. They want to sign a 10-year PPA and you need 20 years to amortize your capital. Capacity, so do they have the in-house skill set and available people to manage that? Some of the considerations, so things that can support that. Aggregation, so communities working together, aggregating different load points, even working with communities for ordering equipment at mass and achieving economies of scale. Partnerships, grant funding, and maximizing revenue streams. So I'm going to run short on time. I'll jump through the three scenarios very quickly and then wrap up at the end. So third-party financing, typically these are physical or virtual PPAs in a deregulated market like Alberta. They can be production or capacity-based, various terms and tenures. In Alberta, the nice thing about virtual power purchase agreements for a financier is you have your grid as your backstop. So if the community defaults or if it's a short-term PPA, the financier can always take the project and sell back into the grid. Important to set clear objectives, establish roles. Like I said, getting to scale, if you can aggregate multiple loads into one contract. Introducing a middle partner is interesting, and a neat perspective for some communities is if you have a bunch of communities that aggregate all of their load and can be retailed, then the developer is actually financing a project through the retailer, and the retailer can retail that back through the customers, that being the communities or the municipalities. It provides some economies of scales and ultimately a cheaper cost of capital or a cheaper power price. I'll move on to the next slide. Self-financing here, typically the communities the project sponsor. Really the key here is non-recourse equipment financing. So there are banks that can provide 3 to 5% financing for up to 80% of the CapEx. The key there is getting to scale, right? And finding the appropriate counterparty. So ensuring you have ample capacity, again, aggregating load, setting projects up in a way that allows you the flexibility. So whether that's a special purpose entity, the financing can be non-recourse, so it's tied to the equipment itself or the project itself. And then the third option, moving on, is a hybrid structure. So what we call a leaseback. So this is where a third party will put up the capital and there'll be a transfer of ownership back to the community over time. This provides a little bit more flexibility in terms of buying down or buying out or termination rights. Sometimes it can be a higher cost of capital. So things you want to look out for is ensuring that there are production guarantees, so the system is actually doing what it was meant to do. And then ensuring that as a financier, your IRR isn't back-ended. So there isn't this massive buyout clause at year 20 and you're not making a return in year 20 and pushing that risk down. So maybe a couple final remarks on the last slide. Lots of structures, there's lots of precedents. It really depends on what the objectives are. There's mitigation required for credit risk and scale, which can include aggregating load or partnering with different communities or entering into virtual power purchase agreements where you have a grid as your backstop. Ensuring the value proposition is there and it's two-way, looking at non-recourse financing or sourcing equity through third-party financiers and long-term partnerships. Leaseback models, an important hybrid. And again, I think the main element here is that communities are a large, scalable, underserved market. And you need to really wrap your head around credit and risk and scale in order to really solve that problem. Because I'm impressed with what Bow Valley's been able to do, but when you look at the market across Canada, it can take a really long time for co-ops and small community projects to achieve scale and pull this off. So I think it requires capital to step up and find innovative ways to finance projects on behalf of communities.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trevor. That was fabulous. Thank you everyone for your presentations. I'm going to just move right on into our Q&A here. We have a few questions up. First one, this is for Sarah. Sarah, what technology are you using for your nano or microgrid?
So like the actual technologies that we're using?
Assuming that's what she means, yes.
Yeah, so we've partnered with Siemens, so they are manufacturing and designing that technology for us.
Okay. And are we talking multiple renewable technologies within it, or specifically solar, thermal, you said? Sorry, Sarah, I can't hear you. Sorry, Sarah, we can't hear you.
I can complement, I guess, right? So when we talk about microgrids, there are multiple technologies involved, right? So there are building blocks attached to it, the storage piece, the electrical piece, right? So different manufacturers have different solution, and it can be either, yeah, so I was just seeing a message from Anoop. So yeah, so there are multiple technologies involved. New Brunswick has partnered with Siemens to help them deploy that solution for that utility.
Perfect. Next question. So Trevor, you are solving a very important problem, energy accessibility and affordability. Do you have any long-term plans to support projects outside of Canada?
Yeah, I mean, we have to learn to walk before we can run. And I think, but the idea is no different than any project. You're developing solutions that you hope you can scale and you hope you can replicate in multiple markets. So when we look at microgrids in the Arctic, for example, wind, solar storage, and trying to penetrate diesel supply or find a new base load, that's not likely any different than a remote island community that's burning oil for their power, other than the resource adequacy is a little bit different. Solar might make up more of that energy mix, or wind might make up more of that energy mix. But really, it's the technical stuff. I'm not an engineer, but it kind of solves itself, right? You're going through the motions and figuring out the technical solution. For me, it's really how do you finance it? How do you backstop? And what's that commercial structure that makes sense for that community, that meets everyone's parameters? And I think that's been the largest problem, is finding capital at scale so that you can solve the problem at scale.
Great. This one is directed towards Jeff. Amazing progress.
Just on that one, right? So if Anouk, you have any requirement outside of Canada, we can have a side chat, right? Because as Schneider, we are very active in across globally, and we do also engage in helping communities.
Perfect. Sorry, Jeff, this one's for you. So amazing progress, Jeff. Are you working with other communities to help them streamline their co-op projects as well?
We are doing that at this moment. We're working with Sabre in Southern Alberta. We're working with a co-op in Athabasca that's getting off. We're connecting them with our contacts in Saskatchewan and Ontario, who've been around for much longer than we have. And, you know, my hope is that at some point in time, we can have more collaboration between the co-ops in Alberta from a financing perspective and sharing best practices. That's something hoping we can get going in the next year or so.
And if I can add to that, Nuke, I mean, I think partnerships are super important from a capacity or lessons learned or structures and financing, but even ordering equipment, right? As you can imagine, ordering 50 kilowatts of panels is a lot different than ordering 5 megawatts of panels from a pricing perspective. So I think partnerships are what can make projects more successful from an economies of scale, getting cheaper equipment, getting cheaper financing. And I think that's definitely one aspect that should help more communities accelerate this energy transition.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, next question. It's critical for New Brunswick Power and Schneider. How important is having the reliable, fast, and security communications network to support the various energy management DER sites in the projects in New Brunswick specifically? And hopefully, Sarah, we can get some sound this time.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, sorry. Zoom is blocked on New Power Networks because it's a cybersecurity risk for us. So every so often my computer will block it and you can't hear me. So I apologize if that happens again. Yeah, obviously cybersecurity is a huge, huge thing for us. And part of our smart grid network is to actually build out our own communications and not rely on those of customers. You know, and there's a concern from customers that we're going to be able to spy on them and do all sorts of things. And that's one of the other issues, is making sure that we have a very safe, secure, reliable communications network to back up our smart grid that is separate from you know, individual customers' internet. Even though there's no actual way we could, you know, watch them through their television, that is a concern that they have. So we make sure that we're addressing cybersecurity and communications backbone security by having our own systems.
Shatis, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, look, cyber risk is real, right? So as soon as you connect the devices, as soon as you connect to the cloud, you are exposed, right? The best, I think Schneider, in Schneider, cyber security is an integrated part of everything that we do, right? Right from a product level, our products are approved with the cybersecurity standards, even at an enterprise level, right? And again, depending upon the appetite, we have we help the companies audit their current cyber risk, and while we are designing the system itself, we develop the protocol in a way that we feel confident that it is fully secured. Look, you will always be exposed, as Sarah is saying, but you try to do your best to minimize the impact, right? You try to build a digital fortress so that it becomes difficult for the hackers to come in. That's what I would say. But a very important critical pillar for all of us to address.
Amazing. Look at that. We're finishing almost exactly on time. There was one final question. Just somebody reached out to see who your contact on the Smart Grid Atlantic project is through NRC. Sarah, feel free to respond to that in the Q&A if it works for you. And thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. And thank you very much to our panelists. That was an absolutely fabulous conversation. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, DEC. Thank you, guys, for listening to us. Thanks.
Bye.